Okay, I guess we are in theory live. Can everybody in the crowd see us so far? We we had a few technical difficulties. One of them was with a volume knob, so we're actually up and going now for everybody out there in the audience. Welcome to hey, there's Charles. Hey, welcome to the. I guess this is our first update really since the Kickstarter thing kicked off. So quite excited to get our feet back into the live virtual pool. And we'll take a few questions and all that fun stuff. But let's once again just sort of introduce everybody in case you're, been living under a virtual rock. Vanessa is to my side, one direction or the other, depending on your browser. Say,
hey guys.
And of course, the man of the hour, our fearless leader, Tom Campbell. If you don't know who he is a physicist, former NASA physicist and consciousness explorer, and we are gathering evidence to help, I guess, develop the virtual reality theory. There's a lot of interesting experiments coming up. Thanks to all you people, we are going to be able to do this, and we do have some updates for that. I see we got more people coming online. Hello, everybody. So what I'm going to do is step out of the way, and we'll just let Tom get rolling, and then we'll take a few questions. So, Tom, give us an update.
Okay. I guess we've already done all our thank yous and all of that when we quit, but I can't help it but say it again. I'm so pleased with the results, and that is thank to all of you. We really are going to do this thing, and we have been working in the background. Of course, there's a lot for us to do now. We've got, I don't know, probably, I don't know how many thousands of what do we call them, prizes or rewards or the things that we promised you guys for making a donation. So we've got thousands of those, and we've been busy trying to find out how are we going to, mail them and manufacture them and all that sort of thing, and the different qualities and expense. And so we're looking at all our options and trying to figure out how to satisfy our obligations there as soon as possible. Also, this was actually going on in the background before the Kickstarter, but it's got more importance now that the Kickstarter has given it some resources, and that is I've put together a not-for-profit corporation that will handle the financing. You see that if once we get that status, then all your donations will be tax deductible. And also that status encourages other philanthropists, people who sometimes donate things like, $10 and $20 million at a time. It will give them a place to donate that's tax deductible. You can't really get into the big money unless you have a what they call a 501c3, which is the not-for-profit corporation to run the program. Philanthropists aren't too keen in just writing checks to individuals and hoping they do something nice with it, So what you can do as a 501c3 not-for-profit means all of your money has to be for the public good. So it all goes back into something that is valuable to the public, and ours fits under education. Helping people see bigger pictures, learning new ways of looking at reality, that sort of thing. So we fit under that niche, and we're in process of pulling that off. Now, the name of this new corporation is Center for the Unification of Science and Consciousness. Okay, Center for the Unification of Science and Consciousness. Now, that doesn't lend itself to a really snappy acronym, but it's CUSAC, and you can call that CUSAC or whatever else suits you as far as the pronunciation. But that's what we're doing now. My vision for CUSAC isn't just to do these experiments. That's just the beginning. If we are available, and we do have some interest in some big philanthropists, that if we get something in the multi-millions of dollars, the first thing we would like to do is pull together a archive, a center for all things MBT. So all of the videos that have ever been done, all of the interviews, all the things we've done, and like any good archive, have it structured so that you can search it by subject. You can search it by a whole set of parameters that'll help it easier for you to find what you want when you want it. So that will be a big help as far as getting the information out, because now, it's in a video someplace, but there's 500 videos and most of them are hours long, so it's not easy to find that nugget that you're looking for. So once we do the center, we'll be able to make that much easier. Interactive search by many different parameters, subject probably being the one that's most important. But after that, that's like step one. After that, and get enough funding for this, we will eventually put up a real physical site, a place that actually is a center. And my vision for that is that it will be a place where people of all persuasions, not just physicists, but all sorts of people who have something to add to the general conversation about science and consciousness and bigger pictures, that sort of thing, places where they can come, do research, an institution that would offer grants to such people, that would publish, the results. In other words, give a little visibility to the people that are now out in the margins who can't get the same kind of access to publication and to funds that other people get, because they're kind of out in the wings. They're out on the fringe of ideas. So this would tend to then start to produce a not-for-profit that would start funding this fringe, so that we'd get a lot more people that are interested, and people who now can have places to do their work, have funding perhaps to do their work, and a place to interchange all the progress and ideas and results and conclusions that might come from that work. So it really would become a worldwide center for, you might say, exploring the bigger picture in all the ways that, that one can do that. So that would be kind of the result of this, or the end, kind of the end point of this corporation that I'm making. So what you guys donated to get started is just the beginning. And these experiments are just the beginning. We're looking past that to a bigger picture of having as broad an effect as possible on the world at large. So at least that's the vision. Now, it always takes time, to get to your vision, but you have to start with some sort of a understanding of where you're going, and that's where we're going with this. So we're probably 3 or 4 months out from getting that approved through the IRS as a not-for-profit corporation, and then after we have that, we can kind of start looking for philanthropists and other people who would like to share their money to change the world. And I think we have a pretty good, a pretty good talk, a pretty good handle on how to do that. Probably the only group with a handle that really has a logical process of how to approach that sort of thing. So hopefully we will do well there. But anyway, just wanted to let you know, the CUSAC is the thing that this has birthed. This Kickstart has birthed it, and now we have a bigger picture, not just the experiments. But let's get back to the experiments themselves, since that was the key thing. Now, we have been preparing, as well for trying to get all the prizes out to people. We've also been preparing the right documentation for offering these experiments to be done in academia, someplace in a research center that hopefully has a lot of credentials and credibility, because that that will give us a step up to begin with. And now, since we have money and we're not begging, we should do all right there. But probably on the last 3 or 4 days of refining that initial documentation that's going to be sent out. So I'd say probably by sometime next week, we will be sending out documents to universities, to people that we think would be good to do this, researchers, scientists that have been working in the field that are very credible. So we'll be sending that out, and we'll be sending it to lots of people that we don't know so well, because there may be some people perfect for this job of doing these experiments that we haven't heard of yet. So it's a little like sending out resumes. You send out lots and lots and lots of them, hoping that a few of them will make a match between you and the process that you want to get done. So that's what this will be like. So for any of you out there in the audience, people who hear this, if you've got someone that you think you'd like to pass this to, some institution or some physicist or whatever, some people that you know who know people who know people, get in touch, and we will probably publish on the Kickstarter site. And I'll certainly publish it on my site, and probably on the MBT Events site, copies of these papers, so that you can go download a copy and send it to the scientist of your choice if you like. So we don't need to control everything that's sent. Now, we would like to know about it. Don't let us get blindsided by somebody says, "Oh, we got your paperwork," and we go, "Huh? Yeah, who are you?" You have to keep in touch with us if you do this. But anyway, you'll be able to find these documents and tell us a little story about who you have in mind, and we'll make sure you get a copy and can send it off. Like I say, it's very much like resumes. If we send out, 500 of them, maybe we'll get 20 back that are really good possibilities, and then we're in the envious position of taking a pick of the best, of the bunch. So that's kind of where we are and what we're doing. So we're very close to starting to mail out things, and once we do that, the ball's rolling. Because when we mail those things out, dates will be set, schedules will be set. Scientists will be telling us, well, I've got, these 6 months available from da 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 da, and we're going to be making deals and getting specific here. So I suspect within the next 3 or 4 or 5 months, we'll probably have some scientists in hand and be ready to get started. So that's about as fast as I could have expected any of this to pull together. There's a whole lot of details that have to be done. I know it sounds kind of easy on the outside, but once you stand up a corporation, you've got a whole lot of details to deal with. You have to put out your request for information on the appropriate letterhead with your organization on it. Now, I know that's kind of trivial, but if you don't look professional, you don't come across as professional. And if you don't come across as professional, you lack credibility. So there's a lot of details that we have to get together, but we're working on it. The same committee that put on the Kickstart is still meeting regularly, and we're still, trying to hash through all the details and assign various works to committees, and we're still chugging away. And you guys who donated, you started it all. So you see, this ball isn't just going to roll till it gets experiments done. Hopefully, it's going to make a big difference in the world in later years. And we've had a couple of connections with some big philanthropists, and we definitely see that this is a big possibility because we've got real good insights and a real unique direction in taking it this way. And if indeed the experiments help buttress up the idea of virtual reality, then we'll even be in a stronger position to make our case there. So that's where we are. That's kind of the state of the union, if you will. And I'm happy as can be just working on this problem now that I know that there's money and we're not having to go begging empty-handed. Please do this experiment for free. Yeah, I know it'll cost you a lot of money, but could you do it anyway? That's just not getting it. So now we're a real force. We've got cash, and we can have an effect. Cash talks.
I'd like to see like an MBT version of Shark Tank, where we kind of just have Tom out there and we have people come up and present their ideas and who they're going to do, and then at the end we decide if we're going to invest in them now because we have the power now. But I do want to shift temporarily over. I have a personal, pretty strong connection with Poland. Did my college senior level paper on Poland, and then spent some time there. And so I obviously am quite excited to hear what happened for you in Poland.
Well, we had a great couple of days, and we were in Poland more than that, but the event was a couple of days long. The venue was perfect. It was probably one of the nicest venues we'd ever been in. It was a room that was made just for this sort of thing. So all of the right acoustics, all the right electronics equipment, everything was there, already set up and ready to go. So that was nice. The people were very very good audience. They came from, I think, 29 different countries.
Wow.
A few from the U.S. flew to Poland. There was a few from all over Europe and Asia, but not a lot. We went through all the countries, and there'd always be like 2 or 3 hands would go up and wave when their country name was called. But when it got to Poland, well, probably 2/3 of the audience came from Poland, and Poland is certainly aware of MBT, and I've mailed numerous books to Poland, but that's not one of the areas on the map that where I have the highest visibility. That would be one of the lower visibility places to be. But yet we had about 200 people show up for this event, which was a very large group. We were to capacity. We had every chair in the place filled. It was, and some even kind of off on the sidelines. So it was a full capacity. And I'd say of those 2/3 that were Polish, probably 2/3 of that 2/3 had probably, so they read the ads and the marketing and so on that brought them in. So there were a lot of newbies and a fair number of old hands as well from all over the world. And that is usually a very challenging audience where you have a lot of new people that need the basics and a lot of older people that have already heard the basics, 10 times. But as it turned out, it worked great. It was a terrific audience, and I think the program was be out. It's being edited. It's all been captured on video, so you'll get a chance to watch it. Hopefully, we're going to get at least some of it, at least the first day's worth, we're going to get in Polish as well as English, because it was a real-time translation. So there was a man there, Witold, who spoke Polish as he listened to me speak English, and we have his voice, so that can be put out in Poland with a with an audio that's Polish. So we've got at least the first day of that. We're struggling trying to find all the audio for the second day. There were some problems. Some equipment wasn't working as expected. So, but at least we have one day of it. So all in all, it was a big success.
It's always good to see, what was it? I can't remember what the number was, but we had like 55 countries, I think, involved in the Kickstarter campaign. So
yes. Yeah. So there was a lot of people there from all over, and probably, like I say, about 40% of them, 50% had headphones on, which means they needed the translation. They didn't understand English, but the translation, Witold, who did the translation, he's also a guy that organized the event. He did an amazing job. It was everything worked perfectly. There weren't any snafus or problems. Sometimes for the people out in the audience, it looks like everything always works so smoothly, but usually we're panicking and in the back trying to make sure that this camera works and that microphone works and so on. But the whole thing was pulled off without any hitches, and he did a terrific job of the translation and of putting it together.
Well, let's since we're trying to kind of keep everybody engaged here, Vanessa, do we have some questions we want to throw out?
Yeah, I just want to say you totally set the bar so high, because you're coming here next week and I'm organizing my first event with you and I have that to compete with. So I wasn't here before. Thanks a lot, Tom. Now I'm like super nervous.
Might as well put a plug in for your event coming up.
Yeah.
Tell us about the event.
Absolutely. July 28th in Vancouver at Unity Church. So far we have 60 people. 60 people are coming, and we have space for 100, so there's still lots of room. It's an all-day event, so from 9 to 5. And in the morning, Tom's going to just be giving us an overview and doing questions and answers from the audience. Then we'll break for lunch, and afterwards we'll come back and we'll do some practical things, some evidential exercises like remote viewing, telepathic communication, and energy healing. So yeah, should be a lot of fun. So for questions, we have Daniel's got the only question around the experiments. He says, there are at least 40 groups working on variations of the dual slit experiment, attempting to prove variations of the many worlds and many minds theories. What makes your experiments any different?
Well, ours have absolutely nothing to do with the many worlds and many minds, I guess would be the big difference. What makes shoes different than horses? The two are just very different. So our experiments are not toward that worldview of the many worlds, many minds. Matter of fact, it's pretty much directly in opposition to that. So, our view looks at the many worlds idea and says that though it's possible, it's not that it is an impossibility that can happen. It's just not likely to happen because it is too inefficient. Now, efficiency is important to computers. If you have something that's being computed, something that is based on information, and our viewpoint starts with the idea that this is an information-based reality, then being parsimonious, being efficient is important. If you're inefficient, you just waste, resources. And we have all of the same advantages, and actually a few more advantages that many worlds gets without even a billionth of the expense. Much, much more efficient. In other words, they spawn new universes, as people make choices, as things happen. Not only people make choices, but as stuff happens, as changes happen, you spawn off new universes. And that requires an awful lot of universes that are people, living parallel lives. That gets to be a very bulky in the amount of resources required, whereas our approach is a top-down approach that is a probabilistic virtual reality. And it, like I say, it can do all of the things that the many worlds can do, plus more, plus explain a whole lot more of the paradoxes that are in not only in physics, but in in metaphysics and psychology, in neuroscience, and in theology. So it explains a lot of the current paradoxes, and the many worlds doesn't really do that. The many worlds is to me, it's a scheme that allows the physicist to maintain his belief in a material existence. So if you're a materialist, then many worlds is your way out of the corner that science has backed itself into with quantum mechanics. So that and ours is just a completely new approach altogether, a whole different perspective on reality and what reality is, what it means, why it is, its purpose, and so on. So the two are very, very different. I don't know what else to say about it. So that's why I would say, yeah, you got a lot of people working on many worlds, and the reason it's more popular right now is because it is a materialist concept. It's all these various realities are all material realities, you see, and it is material based, and that is the belief of scientists. So it does meet with the scientific belief, and that will automatically make it more popular. Matter of fact, it will even it will draw interest just for that reason alone. But the idea of this being an information-based reality has been gaining numbers within physics departments that say that this is it appears that this is a information-based reality, which is another way of saying a virtual reality. That idea has been growing, I don't know, probably is even faster than geometric progression. It's a very fast-growing idea in physics, and that's the area that we drop into. Although we are very different from all of the others that claim this is a virtual reality. You know, there's lots of ways of looking at a virtual reality, and most of the people who are looking at virtual reality fall into something that is also very, very unlikely, and that is that we are a virtual reality game created by future generations of ourselves. And that is a thing that Nick Bostrom started, I don't know, a decade and a half ago, but it's gaining popularity, and it's had a couple of people with, big visibility, like Elon Musk, hop on that bandwagon, which has given it a lot of press. So all virtual reality ideas are not the same. That one, that it is a virtual reality, we agree on, and everything after that, we go off on a different path. Okay, and our path, it is a virtual reality. Consciousness is the computer. Consciousness is fundamental. All other realities are virtual realities. The only thing that's fundamental is consciousness. So that's where we come from. And our theory has enabled us to solve some paradoxes that the others cannot. And part of these experiments are to test our theory. So we'll just see how the experiments work out and where that goes. And, the way it is in science and in the world of ideas is that eventually the better ideas float to the top. It may take centuries. We had Greeks talking about the round earth 200 years before anybody else thought it was a good idea. So it takes a while, but eventually, the good ideas work their way to the top. So it's not necessarily a fast process, but it's one we're engaged in, and we're hoping that we get to leave a mark here on science, on metaphysics, and on the world as far as making this a kinder, gentler, more livable environment.
You know what, Tom, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and some of the people that I, tend to watch a lot of, when they talk about the observer effect, they're making essentially their conclusion is that it's because of the detector, the physical detector putting out a photon or whatever, trying to read it, that collapses the wave function. And, essentially one of the first experiments that we're going to do is essentially going to put that to the test, right?
Exactly. We're going to put that to the test. And what we say is that because this is a virtual reality, the reality only exists in the minds of the players. We, the players, that's us and all the people that have logged on here listening to this, we're the players. We are consciousness. We're not a body. The body is our avatar. Okay, but all the virtual reality only exists in the minds of the players. Now that's the way all the virtual reality games work, right? The virtual reality exists in the minds of the players. Well, if that's the case, then that is the perfect explanation of the observer effect. If you don't have a player involved, that is a consciousness involved some way, if there isn't data that's being brought out into this world by sending some data into data stream to one of the players, then nothing's happened in the reality. If nothing has come to a data stream to a player, then nothing can possibly also have happened within the reality, because the reality is only in the minds of the players. So that is one that we are going to test right off, and that's an easy one. That ought to take, these physicists like a day to set up and 10 minutes to run. So it's going to be the first one out as far as what we're going to find out about, whether it works that way or not. So that is true, Scott. That'll be the first test, because that's the easiest one.
I noticed that David had chimed in just a little while about. He asked a question that we addressed earlier, but I just wanted to alert David. We have not found a physicist yet for this. We are coming up to that process. In case we are in the process of putting together essentially kind of the RFP, so that whole process is underway, but is going to take a little while to get everything rounded out.
And I might as well.
All right, Vanessa, what's our?
David.
Okay.
Well, let me say something to David then, since you brought that up. David, as soon as we get that, which should be next week, I have planned to send you a copy of it right away, because I know you have some scientists that you talk to, and you're helping us work on possibilities. And that has been my intent all along. As soon as we get our act together and know what we're doing, that you'll be included in it. So look at your email next week, and hopefully you'll get something from me that'll give us a status exactly where we are and give you a copy of the documentation.
Cool. All right. What's up next, Vanessa?
Just Tom, what you were talking about, how this reality only exists in the minds of consciousness. Sometimes I find that when people hear that, they're like, so then where is consciousness? If this, where are we? And this question kind of is looking at it from that same materialistic lens in a sense. It's from Juan Carlos, and he says, it's an odd question, but if your test results confirm that we're living in a simulated reality, how can we figure out when we're finally living in the real reality and not another simulation?
As I said, the only thing that's real is consciousness itself. Any reality that you're in which you can experience, we call those an experiential reality. So you can get into a reality and you can actually experience something there, will be a virtual reality. There is no, we're in the fake one now, and now we're going to be in the real one. It's not like that. All experiential realities are virtual realities in this system. And to the answer to the question of, well, where is this consciousness? Well, look at a computer game. Take any game. Take The Sims. Okay, let's just talk about The Sims. Okay, if you're a Sims character, where's the consciousness? If you're a Sims character and you're an avatar, where's the consciousness? Well, it's not inside the Sims game. It's not in your reality that the avatar's in. It has to be outside that reality. And where's the computer that's computing that Sims game? Again, it can't be in the Sims reality. It has to be outside the Sims reality. That's just the nature of virtual reality. The player and the computer are outside the virtual reality that they are playing, that they're creating. You see? So another way of saying that is that consciousness is non-physical from the perspective of the avatar. So here we are, we're in this virtual reality. We think we are avatars. Well, we don't. We believe that the avatar is us completely, you see, but we're really consciousness. We're a player. So we're not in the virtual reality. We're just a player. Our avatar is in the virtual reality. We're consciousness. Okay, we're fundamental. The skin and blood and bone avatar that you're playing according to a rule set. And again, for those that are new, this virtual reality is not programmed. This virtual reality is evolved. It's evolved from rule set and initial conditions. So that's where consciousness is. It is, in Dr. Edward Fredkin's words, it's in other. In other words, other than here. It has to be outside of the virtual reality. So we then define consciousness as non-physical relative to the virtual reality. Just like the elf or the Sims character would define, the player and the computer as non-physical, relative to the virtual reality of Sims or World of Warcraft. So it works the same way.
Yeah, I think that's, kind of when I talk to people about this, I have to explain a lot of this because it doesn't always connect right away. And, one of the things that I kind of came out of my mouth without thinking about it, and I was like, oh, that was actually semi-profound. I'm capable of it every once in a while, was that, essentially, what we're dealing with here is, gathering evidence to not only the virtuality, but essentially to show that consciousness is fundamental. So the experiments that you've done are your best estimation as to how that consciousness has formed the virtual reality. But if they don't come out as you predict, that doesn't mean that consciousness isn't fundamental. That means that we need to do further tests to continue down that road.
Absolutely. Yeah, this isn't, these experiments are not, they don't get their value or their importance or significance just based on whether or not they come out the way I've predicted that they'll come out. My predictions are all based from where I am in the theory now. You see, so you can develop a theory only so far, and then you've got some questions and you can't answer, and the only way to go forward is to do some experiments. You have to do some experiments to find out what really is. How does it work? Just like our idea about the observer. You see, that's just our idea. That's where my theory takes us first. And when we learn about that, we'll get an answer from that experiment. And if it turns out that we were right, well, then, okay, the way we understand it now seems to be the way it works. But if we find out we're wrong, well, then we need to dig a little deeper and modify the theory to include, the way the real world works. If we can't do that, then it means the theory isn't a very good one. Well, you need to find that out if you're making a theory. I mean, that's what science does, right? You want to find that out. That's not something you want to avoid. If that's the case, you want to find it out. So that's the way it is. We're going to learn, no matter how these experiments come out, we're going to learn. And what it will do is it'll unstick us from kind of the sticking points where we are now with how this theory of consciousness actually develops the physical world. In other words, deriving science, deriving quantum mechanics out of a theory of consciousness. That's what we're trying to do. And it would be probably the first time in the history of science, if I get it all right on the first guess. That is not likely to happen. It's likely to happen that we'll go, oh, okay, well, if it doesn't work that way, then how does it work? You see, and then you find another way of thinking at the problem and understand a little more, and you go forward. That's generally the way science works. But I'm at a sticking point now because I say, well, here's the way I think it works. And there's just no science, there's no experiment. There's no experiments that say that it's wrong or that it's right. You kind of run into this dead end. Well, then your theory stops developing along that line because you're at this sticking point. That's why we're doing these experiments, so that we get unstuck and we can move forward. Right or wrong isn't the point. The point is to find out how does reality work, and then can we build that into our theory? See, that's science. Science isn't, it's not showboating. It's not like, well, I got this theory and this is the way they're going to work, and then you're great if you're right, and you're a loser if you're wrong. That's something else. That's Hollywood. That's some other kind of a deal. But real science doesn't work like that. That's maybe Hollywood science or science on a cartoon or something. But it doesn't really work like that. You have to find out, how does the reality work? And then how does your model inform that? How can I, from my model, derive the way reality actually works? My model needs to be able to do that. If it doesn't, then that's a problem in my model. My model now isn't as general as I'd like it to be. It's still a good model of consciousness, but my way of taking consciousness and deriving quantum mechanics would then be seen as flawed and need some work. You see, so it doesn't crash the whole thing. All it does is say that trying to derive quantum mechanics from the ground up with a theory of consciousness has run into a place where it needs some experimental evidence to go forward. And that's where we are. And all the donations we got are basically getting us unstuck. So after we get these experiments, we will much better know how to take the next step in our consciousness, explain science as well as everything else. And we may have more work cut out for us. We may have to back up a little, or we may be right on the money and just move on forward. Who knows? You just can't tell till you do the experiment. And it's a very bad form for scientists to end up in an experimental situation convinced of exactly how it's going to come out. Even if they think that way in their mind, they keep it to themselves. The way scientists interact with science is that everybody stays objective and detached and let the experiment speak for itself. There's no grandstanding. There's no, talking about, how great this is going to be or that's going to be. Scientists don't act like that. That's not science. Science is a bunch of people who are interested in finding out how the world works. And that's the way science works. Now, that doesn't play so well in the market. When you get talking to people and they're non-scientists, they want to see it all in black and white and, you're going to win or you're going to lose. And they get in that kind of a mindset, but that's not really the way science works. Science works by doing experiments and then developing theory to explain the results of the experiments. And that's what we're trying to do. So it's going to be terrific. I'm going to learn the stuff I need to learn to go forward with the theory that I've got. And that is a very happy thing for me. So I'm not concerned about exactly how it's going to come out. I just need to know what the facts are so that I can make a better theory.
Yeah, and the reason that we're able to do it are right out there. Everybody did a wonderful job getting
Absolutely.
us. I'm still like, people that have kind of been following me on Facebook and other things they're just like, good God, that you guys just really took off. And I think we reached our funding like halfway through. And so it's just it's such an exciting time for all of us. And as Tom alluded to, like, we're all still working. This is our first live update, but we've all been working on things. So just know that we haven't slowed down. And Tom is not putting the money to paying his mortgage, as some people were saying.
No. No, that's why I created this not-for-profit corporation, because all money goes there. And once it goes into a nonprofit, there are a lot of rules, a lot of laws that tell you exactly what can and can't be done with that money. And that makes it really impossible to, I shouldn't say impossible, nothing's impossible, but it makes it clearly illegal to tamper with any of that money, because these organizations that are nonprofit, they have to have independent audits done on them on a regular basis. And external people come in to audit such things. That's just part of the process of being a not-for-profit. They don't want people to get a not-for-profit status and then go off making money somehow, on the sly. So those organizations are looked at very carefully to maintain their status and to stay out of jail. So by making this a nonprofit, that made all the bookkeeping easy. Just throw everything in the nonprofit and then just obey the rules that have to do with nonprofits. So
even nonprofits have rule sets.
Yes.
All right, Vanessa, do we got any more questions?
We do have some more questions. A lot of people, when they hear that this is a virtual reality, they feel like, well, then what's the point? It's a virtual reality. It doesn't matter. It's all just data. It's information. I know that, Tom, you say, well, actually, there is a point to it. So this is a fun question that Larry has. He's saying, Tom, do you vote on the presidential election? And if so, who do you vote on? Just kidding about the end part, but.
Well, now you're jumping into politics, and it is my policy that in public forums you stay away from religion and you stay away from politics. You can talk about both in very general terms, but don't get too specific about either, because what all you do is start a fight, and after the fight's over, everybody is worse off than if you just kept your mouth shut. So you're just going to have to guess at that one, because that's not appropriate conversation to have in this forum. But, if you hang around MBT and me and my work enough, let me say that the answer to that question will become very obvious. But you'll have to figure it out.
I wish the entirety of Facebook would behave like you, Tom. All right. So, one of the things that, again, this is, when talking to people, a lot of those, similar things come up. And since I'm a meteorologist, I have a lot of meteorologist friends and scientist friends. And, one of the things that we've discussed is that, consciousness is really one of the big problems, for materialism. They don't have a way of like, where does it come from? MBT has a way of not only, approaching it, but explaining it. And I think one of the biggest revelations for me, who went from theologian to scientist to kind of being both now, was that we have, the physical realm and all that fun stuff. But once you start to look at the non-physical as being something that is somewhat provable and observable, you start to realize that the non-physical vastly dominates our reality over the physical.
Absolutely. And another way of looking at that and saying a similar thing is that if you look at all the things in your experience that are objective and all the things in your experience that are subjective, you'll come to the similar conclusion. And that is that all the things in your experience that are objective turn out to be the things that are not all that significant. It's the props, it's the stuff is objective. But all of those things that are subjective, like love and caring and, relationship and all of that sort of thing, those are all subjective things. Justice, and you can go on, the list of subjective ideas. That's the stuff that really matters to us. That's what's important to our life. So that's kind of a parallel idea. And that is, if you look at the world of science, at least hard science, has walled itself off only into the realm of the objective. That's it. They work with the objective, and anything else is pseudoscience. Now you have some soft sciences that try real hard to be objective, because otherwise they get tossed out as being sciences at all. But they have to do that with statistics. See, there's no way if somebody tells you they have a headache and you give them a pill and they say, I don't have a headache now. How do you measure that? How do you measure their sense of headacheness? You can't. And how do you know that your pill caused that to happen? It didn't just happen anyway. You can't. You see, you don't know. There's a lot of, it's not an objective thing. It's a subjective thing. And you can do subjective science with statistics, you see. And of course, our virtual reality is done with statistics and probability. You see, it's it does a kind of a similar way. So the objective world that is just the stuff is interesting, and it's wonderful because we got a lot of neat stuff. Like we can do these live broadcasts, right? That's because we got a lot of neat electronic stuff that allows us to do that. So stuff is nice. And it, stuff, washes your clothes at night, while you go read a book. It does a lot of things for us. So it's not that stuff is a negative thing, but it's not the fundamental stuff, of our life is not objective stuff. It's the subjective world. It's the caring. It's the relationship. It's the interaction. All of that is really the most important thing in our life. So the idea that science is limited to that part of our life that is the least important. And the social sciences, or the soft sciences, they go a little bit more to it, but there's a whole lot they can't do either, because if they can't put it in a statistical format, then they won't do it either. They stay away from it. So things like justice and love and compassion, it's hard to put any of that into a statistical format. So the social sciences really don't deal with that much either, except other than note that it exists in some people some of the time. So this idea that, yes, when you look at consciousness, suddenly your world gets a lot bigger. You have it's like when you look at the subjective as opposed to the objective, then your world gets a whole lot bigger. And that's true with the non-physical and the physical. You look at consciousness, you see that it has to be non-physical from the perspective of the virtual reality, which is what we call physical. And suddenly your reality gets so much bigger. There's so much more that makes sense and so much more that becomes logical. And there is such a thing as subjective science. You can do subjective science. You just have to do it carefully, and you have to do it with probability and statistics and a lot of careful research. You can't just make one measurement. You got to make 1,000 measurements and then look at the context in which those 1,000 measurements were made.
It seems to me, a lot of, just being a conscious individual is essentially being you're a scientist of the subjective, essentially.
Yes.
All right. Well, Vanessa, what else have we got here?
Yes.
We're getting a little low on time, so let's see if we can grab one or two more.
Okay, so Rodrigo just asked, it seems that the virtual reality we live in was designed so that its real nature would not be easily revealed, maybe because most of us are not prepared to deal with it. Do you think that the larger consciousness system counted on someday some humans could reveal its real nature?
Okay. Well, I get a lot of those kinds of questions that say, well, if a good virtual reality is one where you can't tell it's a virtual reality, then just the fact that we're doing this science, looking into it, trying to show that it's a virtual reality, is that not counterproductive to, the way the system's supposed to work? And it's no. What we're here for is to evolve the quality of our consciousness. Now, we don't have time for me to tell you exactly what that means, but that's our purpose and point in coming here. And as you grow up, as you evolve the quality of your consciousness, as you move toward becoming cooperative and caring, the opportunities you have grow and get bigger, and your reality gets bigger. Your decision space gets bigger. Your understanding gets bigger, and you get to see bigger pictures. If you don't increase the quality of your consciousness and you've got a very low quality of consciousness, then your worldview is very small. It just exists only, and really a very small part of the objective world is what your world is. So it's a little tiny view. And so as we grow up, getting a bigger perspective, and what comes with that is understanding that this is a virtual reality, understanding that consciousness, is what we really are, not avatars, not bodies. So these understandings are just part of being successful here. So they're not kind of counter to our purpose. They are part of the purpose. But this understanding is reserved for people who are ready for it. If you're not ready for it, which means you haven't raised the quality of your consciousness enough to be able to process this information, then you don't get it. And you don't understand it, and it seems like it's nonsense to you because it just isn't the way the world seems, the way you've always learned it. But as you do grow up, it not only makes sense to you, but it makes better and better and better sense the more you understand the bigger picture. All sorts of things that before were kind of mysterious and mystical and weird, and you didn't know how and why they happened and how things connected, suddenly all those connections and all those answers make sense. And that is part of the process of growing up. So yes, the majority of humans aren't quite ready yet. And because of that, they really don't have access to or awareness of actually the nature of who they are. But it's there waiting for them as they grow up, as they make better choices with their conscious free will. So it's just part of the growing up process. Yes, most people are unaware. And in virtual realities, you'd like it to be so good that people don't notice. But in this virtual reality, you want people to notice as they grow up, because it'll help them grow up more. The more they see of it, the more obvious everything becomes. The more of all the mysteries in their life start to unravel into things that now become logical. Everything tends to make sense. And as we're doing here, even the quantum mechanics makes more sense. So if consciousness is the thing that's fundamental, then you have to see how that derives everything else, which is why we started, working to derive science and to answer the paradoxes that are in science from a virtual reality viewpoint. Our virtual reality viewpoint, not Elon Musk's virtual reality, viewpoint, and not, the other virtual reality viewpoints that are around, but from our viewpoint. And we found this very successful. So from my viewpoint, I can explain quantum mechanics as a logical science, not as a not as a weird science, and as a spooky science, like Einstein said. And I can explain why C is a constant, in relativity, rather than just take that as an assumption. That falls out as a simple fact out of the virtual reality science that I have. So a lot of things that have been paradoxes for a long time in science, and there's dozens of them. The virtual reality theory of mine answers all those with just logic. So we'll see. It doesn't mean that the idea I have with quantum mechanics is going to work out. It just means that I've got this idea, and now I need some experiments to tell me whether it's a good idea or not. So there's where we are. You know, we're at exciting times. All sorts of things are out there that can happen now. And it's nice that on the tail end of all of this, it's not just about physics. This really isn't about physics, because if you went out into the wide world and said, oh, what do you think about these physics experiments? Everybody would roll their eyes and go back to whatever it was they were doing. Nobody really cares a whole lot about physics experiments. But the thing that makes these important, if if the physics works the way we think it does, then that gives a lot of credibility to us in general. And our whole viewpoint, our whole reason for being here in this theory is to grow up, is to have a higher quality of consciousness, is to become cooperative, caring, compassionate, to stop thinking just about yourself and start thinking about other. Instead of thinking how, what can I get? It's what can I give? How can I serve? So it's a whole different attitude that isn't just going to change science, but it's going to hopefully change this whole world as we see it, make it a kinder, gentler, more livable space. Once people see that this makes sense, it's not just theory without fact. It makes sense. It's not religion. It's logic-based. It's all derived logically. So that's the whole point. That's why we're here. And I think that's why so many people stood up and gave us some of their money, because they want to know too. And they also would like this to be a kinder, gentler place. And if this helps us get there quicker, well, it's worth the donation.
They also, since I was a theologian first, what I find, great about the virtual reality thing is that virtual reality really addresses the same issue, fundamental issue as theology does, in that the conclusion is that we're here intentionally. It's not this random, we just came out of nowhere and we can't explain why. It's that we're obviously here. Now, it doesn't explain necessarily why, what the intention is, but I think that's somewhat, the subjective science we all have to do is, why am I here and what's the intention? But virtual reality addresses that very similar to what theology does.
Yeah, well, the thing is, where theology ends up not knowing exactly and comes up with one kind of pat answer that answers all the questions that get thrown at him, and that is, well, God does it. Why? Well, God's unfathomable. He does whatever he does, and you won't know. So God does it is just not a real satisfactory answer for scientists. They want more traction than that, more information. Why is it like that? Why do we have this intent? Why is growing the quality of your consciousness an important thing? And why would that be, key to this virtual reality? And why was a virtual reality created? And all of these whys. Well, this theory has logical derivations that come to clear answers for all of those questions. And we never get to the point where we just say, oh, consciousness does it, because that's just the way consciousness is. We have to derive it logically. Why does consciousness do that? Why couldn't it do it some other way? And the way we come up with is say, well, this is the only way that is efficient. This is the only way that is practical. It's not that it couldn't be done some other way, but other ways are less efficient, less practical. And if you have a system like consciousness, it's an information system, it has to be finite. It's only got so many bits to work with and so many cycles to process, and it's going to do whatever it does as efficiently as possible. So that gives us how do we choose? Okay, there's maybe 5 different ways or reasons that might take you to the same endpoint. Well, only one of them is the most efficient, straightforward way to get there. And then that's the logical way that a system would go. This is evolution. We're evolving. Evolution evolves to be more efficient. That's its whole thing. Things don't evolve to be inefficient. Things that are inefficient become extinct. So you've got a system that is evolving. An evolved system, it's going to be efficient. And that then is how we get to decide what it means and why it works that way. So this theory we put together is what seems most efficient, which is why we argue with many worlds. Our system does all that and more, plus it's efficient. Many worlds gets to a lot of the same things, but it's terribly inefficient by comparison. Either way might work, but a system that was intelligent and evolving would take the efficient way.
I see we are getting to where we need to wrap up. I do want to mention, I see that Claudio showed up late. Way to go, Claudio. But yes, we did approach the experiments, and we will be posting this on YouTube later. But the bottom line is that we are getting there. The RFP is getting there. So you will get your answer, especially if you want to watch the replay. Vanessa, could you give one last plug to your thing? Because I'm excited because I get to meet Vanessa and Tom in person for the first time. It's all been in the email world and over the video. So I'm going to be there as well. But tell us what's going on.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. That's next Tuesday, a week from today. We will all go over to Hollyhock, and we will meet with amazing heart-centered people over there who are doing epic things in the world. So we'll be there for 2 days, meeting and connecting with people. And then we'll come back to Vancouver, and we will have the all-day event on July 8th in Vancouver. So yeah, if you want more information, just go to mybigtoe.ca. So it's the Canadian website, and that's where the event is located on there. So yeah, thanks for that.
If you go there, it comes with a free donut.
Tim Hortons.
All right. Well, I wouldn't be doing my job if I let us go much longer. So I'm going to bid everybody adieu, and thank you to Vanessa and Tom for joining us. And we will be doing more of these as we go. And hopefully I'm going to bring a camera with me, certainly, to a lot of the events that I'm going to be meeting up with. So we'll have some updates on YouTube. Keep your eyes on YouTube. And again, everybody, thanks so much. I'm still kind of pinching myself that we're even here and how well this all turned out. So, Tom, any final parting words?
No, just one more time. I tell you, thank you, everybody that contributed to this, everybody, because now we're actually going to find out and do it. And like I say, that'll get me unstuck on many things. It doesn't necessarily mean it'll all turn out the way I think it might, but it'll mean that I'll get unstuck and can start moving forward into making better theory and better understanding. So I thank everybody for making this possible. Otherwise, we'd still be sitting around saying, yeah, well, we think this is it, but there's no really way to know for sure unless somebody does an experiment. But we don't have any money and nobody will do them for free. So now we're out of that box and we're moving forward. So yeah, great.
Awesome. Well, big thanks to everybody. We just keep your eyes on the Kickstarter site and on YouTube. We will be posting updates as they come in. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.